This is part of the Harley-Davidson legend.
The answer to every search can be found on the great American freedom machines.
And the world's motorcycle land speed record belongs to Harley-Davidson.
Ride a new Harley-Davidson.
Greatest name on two wheels.
Hi, this is David Kreidler. I'm the exhibits curator at the Harley-Davidson Museum. Today I'm going to annihilate some time and space. Well, at least I'm going to be talking about historic annihilation. If you're a motorcyclist and are really into long-distance riding, you could take on a number of challenges that are sanctioned by various motorcycle groups. They're usually time travels, go so far in such a such time period. A popular one is 1,000 miles in 24 hours. Beyond the rider's perseverance, you probably need at least two other things. The first, obviously, is a motorcycle, and the second, maybe just as obviously, is a highway. Less than 100 years ago, however, the only method widely available to travel 1,000 miles in 24 hours would have been a train. Considering this is a podcast by Harley-Davidson, trains might seem like a strange thing for me to talk about, but I'm going to anyway, because of this phrase I've always enjoyed that dates back to the 1800s, when trains were kings of transportation. You see, back then there was a lot of new technologies that altered people's perception of distance. And if Americans were particularly impressed with some new technology, usually having to do with communication or transportation, they would declare that it had annihilated time and space. So let me use that phrase in a sentence. The year before William A. Davidson, one of Harley's four founders, was born in 1870, the Transcontinental Railroad was completed. People in that time said this new line of track that had connected the East Coast with the West Coast had annihilated time and space. And it absolutely did. In 1803, Lewis and Clark took 2.5 years to travel from St. Louis to the Pacific and back, a roughly 8,000-mile trip. Sure, they were also exploring, but it would have been a long trip anyway. Just take, for instance, one of the most famous road trips in history, that of Western settlers heading along the Oregon Trail. In the 1840s, if you were a settler, you'd start in Missouri, travel 2,000 miles, and end up in Oregon 4 to 6 months later. When the Transcontinental Railroad was completed, a traveler can conceivably go coast to coast and back again about 6,000 miles in under a week. To understand what that means, let's put it into modern terms. Just after World War II, a flight of B-29 bombers flew just under 6,000 miles from Japan to Chicago in 27 hours and 28 minutes. Today, a nonstop flight from Chicago to Japan takes roughly 13 hours. And hey, that's not bad. Modern technology cut the time in half. But if transportation technology had cut down travel time in the last 75 years, as much as it did between Lewis and Clark and the Transcontinental Railroad, we'd be able to board some sort of contraption in Chicago and be in Japan 8.5 minutes later. So the railroad was a big deal, and it remained the way to travel long distance for a really long time because nothing could beat it. But by the end of the 1800s, a new era was dawning, the era of personal transportation thanks to the bicycle. That's right, the spark to a new transportation revolution that gave us our modern era of cars and motorcycles and made things like 1,000 miles in 24 hours possible wasn't the internal combustion engine, it was the bicycle. The invention of the bicycle was the first time in human history that someone could walk out of their house and didn't have to start walking, mount a horse, get on a boat, or wait for someone else to show up in a horse-drawn vehicle or a train to go from one town to the next. And after they were done, they could pick the bicycle up and carry it in the house. Bicycles were the catalyst, and what followed was personal motorized transportation. A lot of people who started the very early car and motorcycle companies were bicycle riders who decided to improve the thing with a motor, and that includes Harley-Davidson. William Harley, a founder and the chief engineer for the company that bears his name, designed a small engine to mount on a bicycle. Amazingly, we actually have a page from those blueprints he drew up for that engine on display in the Harley-Davidson Museum. In 1903, Harley and the Davidsons built their first true motorcycle. Business boomed, and people could start traveling across the country not on a railroad, but on their trusty Harley-Davidson. Okay, I'm jumping a lot of years there because most people still couldn't travel long distances on a motorcycle in 1903. They really couldn't in 1913. And they really would have had trouble doing it in 1923. And that's because the other key piece to long-distance travel was still missing, the modern highway system. American roads hadn't been updated for motorized transportation when Harley was founded. In fact, a 1908 federal government report on roads found that of the approximately 3.4 million miles of rural roads in the U.S., only 10% had any surfacing, and that was being really liberal with the word surface. In fact, the Harley-Davidson Archives has a photograph that kind of shows the state of roads at this time. We have a picture of Walter Davidson standing next to a Harley-Davidson motorcycle in what appears to be a muddy field, and this mud is thick. I mean, the first time I saw it, I thought, what is he doing? Harley-Davidson won't be releasing the Pan America until 2021, so he was a little early to be trying to showcase the company's adventure touring bike. But, hey, maybe he was just that kind of visionary. Joking aside, it took a few seconds, but I realized what he was actually standing in was the middle of a road. There were people who ventured out onto these types of roads with cars and motorcycles, and they went a long distance. They traveled cross country. But it really did take a certain type of person and a certain sense of adventure. There was no AAA, no roadside assistance. If a tire popped, a common occurrence, or if your vehicle broke, you better know how to fix it or be prepared to walk. It wasn't fast, it wasn't comfortable, but it did happen. It would have continued happening for a while longer if not for the Good Roads movement, another thing given to us by American bicyclists. The Good Roads movement was a political movement that started in the 1870s and lobbied for the creation of modern roadways. The movement argued that paved roads would benefit everyone, travelers on bicycles, motorcycles, in cars, as well as people like businessmen and farmers who'd be able to get their goods and crops to market in any kind of weather. Hindsight being 2020, we would see it as a no-brainer, but the Good Roads movement had to push its agenda for years. And even when the U.S. government started working with states to fund construction of highways in 1916, thanks to World War I and after the war recession, modern highway construction didn't really start in earnest until the 1920s. Eventually, though, as roads were paved and highways were built, every motorcyclist who wanted to could annihilate some space and some time of their own.